Hi guys, a very warm welcome to the Niels van Roij Design YouTube channel. Welcome to the Daytona Shooting Brake Hommage behind me, and today is a very special day because today we're going to have a talk about all the work, all the hours that went into getting the car to the current stage with the man who did it, Pim. Welcome, and welcome at your work actually, right?
Ja, dat klopt inderdaad. Ja.
So, you work for De Vries Exclusive Car Painting.
Yes.
I'll ask the questions in English and translate what Pim has to say about all the work, all the many hours that went into this car. So let's start with that. Why does it look like this at the current stage? Because it's very smooth, but you can still see there's some color differences, for instance, in the body. What do we see here actually?
Dit is de laatste laag primer voordat ik het ga spuiten.
So it's the last primer before the final coat of black will go on.
Ja, dat klopt inderdaad. We gaan straks helemaal ontvetten, schoonmaken.
So it's going to be cleaned.
Ja.
All the dust will be gone, all the grease will be taken off the car. Because of course I've been touching it whilst filming, so that has to be taken off before you can, of course, paint it with black metallic.
Klopt inderdaad. En als dat allemaal gedaan is, ga ik het afkleven met een stofdoek. En in de cabine kunnen we dat heel mooi spuiten en zo min mogelijk stof creëren.
Yeah, so in the paint booth, of course, there are all sorts of extractor devices taking out the dusty air and making sure the car will be staying entirely clean. We've been talking to Time, of course, in the previous video, but you've done the actual work on the Daytona Shooting Brake Hommage. And we were talking earlier about the light lines, for instance, here on the fender. Can you tell me a bit about your challenges for this specific car and what you come across making it towards this stage?
De grootste uitdaging is natuurlijk alle lijnen die jij ontworpen hebt, om die perfect te krijgen.
So the biggest challenge is to perfect the lines that are designed by yours truly on paper, made by Bas van Rome in aluminium, and then to make them like super clean basically, prepare them for the final coat of paint.
Ja. En dan natuurlijk heb je links en rechts, moet ook kloppen.
Yeah, left and right, the car has to be symmetrical.
Ja. En dat is mijn uitdaging, en zeker op de daklijn, die is meteen zichtbaar links-rechts, dus die heb ik helemaal moeten meten. En,
so yeah, these feature lines here on the roof are of course very obvious. It's a low car, so wherever you walk around the car you will see this, and it's one of the key features of the design as well, with a light catcher that runs all the way towards the windscreen. And I can imagine, for instance, these soft surface transitions from almost nothing to getting up a little bit and higher, that's complex, not just to do at one side, but to mimic it exactly towards the other, because of course, like you said earlier, it has to be symmetrical.
Ja, klopt.
One of the lines that we've talked about with each other before the film started was this line here, which is very hard to spot, but a key line for the design of the car. And maybe it's interesting to take some more bodywork in and for you to speak about that a bit more in depth. Okay, cool. So let's get some fenders and doors in.
Kijk, als je ziet deze lijn, die loopt hier, die is ook heel flauw. Deze is wat scherper, maar daaronder loopt...
It's a very soft line, yeah.
En die loopt weer door op het achterscherm.
Exactly, so yeah, the line starts actually from the front fender. We have an example sitting here. So that's where that line is, right? It starts very softly and it comes in around that area and then increases in its sharpness, one could say, in its definition, but it's very soft. Continues, like you said, in the door and then eventually in the fender. Why is that so hard?
Wel, het is lastig omdat het zo fijn is dat het heel snel al vlak wordt. Dus dat de lijn niet meer zichtbaar is.
It's extremely thin, you could say, the transition from one surface to another, right? So if you would sand, let's say, a little bit too forceful, you would sand the line out completely, right? It's less than half a millimeter of transition from one surface into the other. Yeah, so that's a very complex line that you spent quite some hours on getting right. Yeah, and of course on top of that, it's not just that line that consistently runs through. It's actually going from a fade out or a fade in, you could say, from that area to being sharp, relatively sharp, to being gone again here, because it cannot interrupt the flow of lines for the facet that we have here, and of course the line coming from the top of the fender over there. So it's a complex sculpture all coming together, and it all has to work on both sides and has to look like the sketch, preferably. Yeah. So when we walk around the car here towards the back, Pim, what could you tell us about, for instance, what we see here? We see a bit of white coming through.
Ja, voordat de grondverf gespoten werd, is er epoxy opgegaan, witte epoxy.
So there's been epoxy put on the car before this coat of grey was put on top. Yeah.
En wanneer ik het witte bereik, is dat mijn stoppunt.
So when you sand the grey layer bit by bit, and finally you touch the white, basically. You barely touch it, but that's your cue to say, okay, I have to stop here, right? And why do you have to sand it down?
Grondverf wordt helemaal glad geschuurd.
So the primer is going to be sanded down.
En als het helemaal glad is, dan kan ik dat controleren of het goed is en dan kan uiteindelijk spuiten.
Yeah, so then you check if the body is entirely flat, as you call it, right? So entirely smooth, without any small imperfections, because of course the body is entirely hammered by hand, so there are tiny, but a lot of tiny imperfections because of all the hammering and the manipulation, basically, of the aluminium, right? So, yeah. And around the facet here, for instance, and the license plate holder, is there something you can talk about? Tell about us the finesse that is in the surfacing, for instance.
Er zijn hele strakke lijnen en
crisp lines,
maar ze moeten wel even rondlopen, rondom.
Yeah, so there is, of course, they're very crisp. They're sharp, so to speak, but there is a small facet, one could say, a rounded facet running all the way around the entire large facet here. And to get that consistent, basically, because of all the surface transitions, because of course you can see it warps, basically, it goes inwards here, accelerates into a different curve than it has here, right? The angles are different, sharper here, more narrow than they are here. So to get that line consistent throughout, that's been a bit of a challenge.
That's a challenge indeed, yeah.
And well, I'm sure there are a lot of highlights you can talk us through about, but we see the bonnet behind us here, perhaps because it's already painted in its first Nero, right? In its first Daytona Nero, in the first black coat. Is it finished now?
No, not yet. We gaan alles helemaal terugschuren.
So again, it's going to be sanded down.
En er komt nog 2 lagen blanke lak op.
So 2 clear coats on top of the black metallic paint we see here.
Klopt.
So what we see in terms of surface finish, would this be, let's say, a normal car? So let's say an ordinary production car, a Mercedes or an Audi or a BMW would be finished to this level. Yeah, so that's basically where we start at as a base for the Daytona Shooting Brake Hommage.
Dat klopt.
Yeah. So after sanding it down, it will receive, you said, 2 clear coats.
Ja.
And what's next?
What's next? Daarna gaan we het nog een keer schuren.
So sanding it down again?
Ja, en dan gaan we het helemaal polijsten, dat het echt een mirror finish wordt.
Okay. So, but in total, I think there will be 4 clear coats,
4
right?
layers of clear coat.
Yeah. So it's apart from what we see here. So we'll get the Nero black, the Daytona black on top. Then we've got 2 clear coats.
Yes.
And then
Again.
sanding 2 clear coats.
Yeah.
Then sanding that down again. So that will provide a beautiful depth to the paint, right? Because that's what we're after. To get to that depth in the paint, you need these 4 layers of clear coat, right?
Klopt.
Yeah. And how do you get it to the rich piano black, let's say? Because what are you going to do after the 4 layers of clear coat?
We can sand it down to P3000
Yeah.
and polish it completely. And that's the mirror finish.
And that's how you receive the mirror finish.
Yes.
Wow, it's been superbly insightful for me. It's always very joyful to see the work of skillful painters in this case, helping to get the sculpture of the Daytona Shooting Brake Hommage to life. So thank you, Pim, thank you, our host today, De Vries Exclusive Car Painting, for showing us the car, taking the time to tell us all about the different stages. So thank you, Pim, for all the hours, the blood, sweat and tears that went into this car. Hopefully not too many tears. A few.
Not yet.
A few. And thank you for tuning in to the Niels van Roij Design channel. And I'll see you very soon for a new video on this car or perhaps one of our other coach built cars.